Tonight, a special edition of the Politics Hub on an extraordinary and unprecedented day with the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. The former prince has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Today is his 66th birthday. Police arrived on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk just after 8 a.m. this morning. Thames Valley Police had previously said they were looking into allegations Andrew leaked confidential reports to Jeffrey Epstein while he was a trade envoy for the UK.
Good afternoon,
What's your reaction to your brother's arrest, sir? Sir, what's your reaction to your brother's arrest?
The King's issued a statement expressing his deepest concern and said the law must take its course. For years, he was described as the Queen's favourite son. Now, Andrew's become the first senior royal member of the royal family in modern history to be arrested. We'll speak to a legal expert to find out what his day will have been like. Meanwhile, on a day of eye-catching statements, we had another one from the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown. He says he's submitted a 5-page dossier providing new additional information from the Epstein files. Plus, I'll speak to SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn. He's accusing the government of having blocked a debate on Andrew last year and says it was a bad misjudgment from the Prime Minister.
We begin this hour with major breaking news out of the United Kingdom. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the former British prince, was arrested this morning on his 66th birthday.
And we'll be live in the United States, where there are renewed calls for Andrew to testify to Congress. Right now, the former prince is still in custody. We are live at Sandringham, Downing Street and Buckingham Palace with full reaction. And here in the studio, we have an extended panel. Former Crime and Policing Minister Tom Pursglove, Hannah Bardell, one of Andrew's most prominent critics while she was an MP, and the Telegraph's royal correspondent, India McTaggart. It's Thursday, I'm Ali Fortescue, live from Westminster, and this is a special edition of the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, it's been a remarkable day that started this morning when we found out police had arrested the former prince on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has always denied wrongdoing, but this is an extraordinary moment. He is the first senior royal in modern history to be arrested. All this on his 66th birthday. Over the next hour, we'll bring you all the political reaction and fallout. But first, our royal correspondent, Brianna Mills, has the story.
The unmarked police cars were seen on the Sandringham estate with no advance warning for the king or the wider palace that his brother was going to be arrested. Thames Valley Police then releasing their statement confirming they were questioning a man in his 60s and searching properties in Norfolk and Berkshire. Not naming him, but it was clear it was Andrew on the day he marks his 66th birthday. The first senior royal in modern history to be arrested, questioned on suspicion of misconduct in public office. It comes after police had been looking at emails from the latest Epstein files and allegations that Andrew, during his time as trade envoy, may have passed on confidential details to the convicted paedophile and other business contacts. Andrew has always denied any wrongdoing.
Really, what it boils down to is the question of whether the police have evidence that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor willfully misconducted himself as a trade envoy to such a degree as to amount to an abuse of the public's trust in him. Now, that's a matter of judgment. It's a matter of evidence. It depends on what evidence the police may have.
Particularly painful for the royal family because it goes right to the heart of their public service. A statement from the king came quickly, saying, "I have learned with deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and suspicion of misconduct in public office. What now follows is the full, fair and proper process. They have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course. Meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all."
Are you concerned about Andrew's arrest, Your Majesty?
Our Hours later, we saw that with both the Queen and King out on separate engagements, aware the questions may come.
What's your reaction to your brother's arrest, sir?
But it's through carrying on with their duties that they continue to try to distance themselves from Andrew. This is an institution that really isn't that reactive. They won't be forced into saying things. But in this case, they knew that there was no alternative. They had to respond because whatever happens around Andrew's arrest, whatever the outcome may be, it does still raise serious questions about trust and also the wider public role of the monarchy. The King and the Palace now hoping the statement shows they are not ignoring the enormity of it all and open to scrutiny in a way that we have never seen before. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News at Buckingham Palace.
Well, lots to get through tonight. Rob Powell, our political correspondent, is in Downing Street. But let's start with Rhiannon, who's been at Buckingham Palace today. Rhiannon, we just saw your report. Let's make no mistake about this. This must have come as a shock to both the Palace and to the King.
Yeah, this is, look, unprecedented. The pictures are shocking. The fact that you see, yes, plainclothes police officers, but still police officers on both the Sandringham estate and the Windsor estate, not protecting members of the royal family, but ultimately looking for evidence relating to this investigation of misconduct in a public office is unbelievable in many ways. As I said in my report there, the King, the Palace didn't have any advance warning about this. And I think what we can see from all of those pictures and the way that it's been handled is really that message that nobody is above the law. And I think also it's a message that they really want to re-emphasise here at the Palace. You saw that in the statement that was released by the King in a way that I've never seen before. They are now opening themselves up, saying, look, come in, we will give you the evidence that you need, we will help with these investigations in any way that we can. We are not hiding away from this. But also there's a lot of jeopardy in this for the wider monarchy. Yes, it's Andrew who is facing those questions by the police. He is the one who's been arrested on these serious charges. But ultimately, for the royal family, those investigations will potentially open up more questions for them, not just the ones that were shouted at the Queen and the King today, but also that sense of what was known over the years, what was maybe not passed on to police forces or authorities to be looked at and probed further. But I think as well as the royal family, of course, there are other high-profile individuals who have kind of very important questions to answer around that, and police forces as well. But what we are seeing from the Palace today is, I think they are recognising the huge reputational risk potentially around all of this. They are trying to show us that they are not burying their heads in the sand. They realise the full enormity of all of this. But ultimately, as the King says, they are going to continue on with their work. And for him, look, this is a family crisis. But in the end, as head of state, as head of the monarchy, he has to put the reputation of the institution first. And it is about making sure that people across the United Kingdom, across the world, can still look at this institution as an anchor for society, as an institution that can be trusted, whatever happens in terms of the outcome around Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor now being arrested.
Rhiannon Mills, thanks so much for that. Well, somewhat unusually, we heard from both the current and former Prime Minister about Andrew today. Let's have a listen first to what the current Prime Minister had to say a little earlier.
Anybody who has any information should testify. So whether it's Andrew or anybody else, anybody who's got relevant information should come forward to whatever the relevant body is. One of the core principles in our system is that everybody is equal under the law and nobody is above the law. And it is really important that that is applied across the board. That is the principle. It's a long-standing principle. It's a very important principle.
Well, let's go live to Downing Street, shall we? And our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who's there for us. Beyond that clip, I don't think we have heard much from Number 10, is that right?
No, very little. They haven't issued any official statements at all today, and because it's recess, because MPs aren't in Westminster and Parliament isn't sitting, we haven't had the regular media briefings that we get, so we haven't been able to ask directly the Number 10 team about it either. What we do know, though, is that at least one part of the government was aware in advance that this extraordinary arrest was about to take place. We understand the Home Office was told in advance by Thames Valley Police that this was going to happen, although Number 10 sources are stressing that when Sir Keir Starmer gave that interview, which was recorded yesterday, he didn't know what was about to happen. So he was essentially setting out the broader government position there. But as I say, since then, very little, next to nothing really from the government about this. I think the closest we've got is probably a question to the Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy, where he basically echoed what Keir Starmer said, that the police process should be allowed to play out and that nobody is above the law. I don't think that's necessarily surprising though. You find Number 10 spokespeople and ministers tend to run a mile when there's anything scandalous connected to the monarchy and royalty, especially when there is a live police investigation involved as well. You've obviously been speaking to some opposition voices, the SNP here in Westminster, their spokesperson attempting to pin it back to Keir Starmer and make it about his judgment. Now, one former occupant of this place has been talking more today, though. That is the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown. He is someone that was in power in Downing Street when the then Prince Andrew was a trade envoy representing the UK government around the world trying to drum up business. He clearly is a Prime Minister as well that brought Lord Mandelson, another Epstein associate, back into the cabinet and appointed him to the House of Lords while he was in power today. He also, though, has quite a long-standing interest in trying to figure out ways to combat issues around human trafficking, around modern slavery, and has been writing quite a lot about this. He called for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor to be interviewed by police last week. He also said there needs to be more work put into some of the Epstein-linked flights that were coming in and out of London, and he said today that he's handed over a memorandum of information to the police forces that he hopes will assist with their inquiries. He did a similar thing when some of the Lord Mandelson allegations in the Epstein files were first released and said that he'd handed over material related to accusations that Lord Mandelson had leaked sensitive financial information to Jeffrey Epstein. Lord Mandelson, of course, denies that he broke the law there. I think it is that Lord Mandelson case that maybe presents the most acute political danger still for this government. That police investigation into Lord Mandelson continues. That is also into allegations of misconduct in public office. It's almost 2 weeks since Lord Mandelson's 2 homes were searched, were raided by police officers as well. So really we see from royalty to politics, the scandal around Jeffrey Epstein and the web of influence around him, pulling in high-profile figures in the most graphic of ways.
Rob Powell for us live there in Downing Street. Thank you very much. Let's bring our panel in for this evening, shall we? Former Conservative Crime and Policing Minister Tom Pursglove, a former Scottish SNP, I should say, MP Hannah Bardell, and royal correspondent at The Telegraph, India McTaggart. Thank you, all three of you. Let's start with you both first. I mean, obviously, Hannah, your party have long been campaigning for Andrew to lose his titles.
Absolutely, and I think there's a... First of all, what we have to recognise is the profound and devastating abuse of young women and girls, the trafficking, the rape, the abuse of those women and girls. And if it was not for the bravery of them, in particular, Virginia Giuffre and her book, Nobody's Child, and she isn't here to see this day, and I know you've interviewed her family, we would not be talking about this. I don't think that, you know, these allegations and this arrest would have happened. And it is remarkable that we have a Prime Minister who has put in place someone like Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, who had associations, known associations, and that we've not even been allowed to debate that in Parliament. And I think that's the point that Stephen Flynn has made today, is that as recently as October last year, there were calls to debate the details of that. I was in Parliament, as was Tom, back in 2022, when the Queen gave Andrew money to pay the out-of-court settlement with Virginia Giuffre, and we were not allowed to debate that then either, and there are lots of questions to be answered about that. There are so many threads to this, but fundamentally, to be in a situation where a member of the royal family has been arrested, which hasn't happened since the 1600s, since Charles I, and has been arrested on misconduct in public office, rather than the very serious allegations that have been made by many about Andrew's potential implication in trafficking of women and girls. I think says something quite profound as well. It is good that he has been arrested. It's good that he's been questioned. And Thames Valley Police have said that they will continue to look into those other allegations. We will see what that brings. But I think that that says something quite profound. It was interesting hearing Helena Kennedy earlier, the KC, saying this shows that we have robust processes in place in the UK. I think it does. It shows that nobody apart from the King is above the law, but it is still, it's the King's police, you know, it's the King's government. MPs who've been silenced into debating this have to swear an oath to the King, and that for me goes to the heart of the problem we have with the establishment in the UK.
Is that right, Tom?
I think transparency around all of this is going to be absolutely critical, and what's happened today felt very inevitable to me in the sense that the pressure was building and building and building. There were more and more allegations, there were more and more elements of disclosure out there, and so this doesn't come as a particular surprise. But it is right that there's this proper process. They need to get to the truth, and I think the message that the Prime Minister tried to get across was the right one, that those who've got allegations, information, anything that can help to build that intelligence picture should come forward, because at the forefront of our minds should be the Epstein victims today, the enormous harm that was done to them that I think, you know, Hannah set out really very eloquently, and particularly Virginia Giuffre, all of her bravery in shining a light on this. But actually the Prime Minister should also live up to, both in letter and in spirit, the words that he uttered on television today when it comes to, for example, transparency from government about the Epstein and Mandelson links and all the documentation that ministers looked at when reaching decisions around the appointment of him as the US ambassador. I think it throws up a whole host of questions, and the momentum on this just isn't going to go away. So transparency is going to be really, really important. I think there's a role for Parliament to play in that, of course. The humble address begins to bring that about. But actually, the key message that I think today really brings to the fore is that whoever you are and whatever your status is and wherever you are in the world, you should not be able to run away from things that have gone on in the past in relation to this terrible situation, and that justice will be served. Yes, that's it. We're hearing again and again today, nobody is above the law. Let's bring India in, shall we? I mean, it's hard to overstate the significance of this. It's unprecedented, really.
There is, without a doubt, it is unprecedented, and it's hard to believe before this morning that any greater harm could befall the royal family in regards to the sort of constant drip feed of the Epstein files by the DOJ. But to have, you know, Queen Elizabeth II's favourite son, King Charles's youngest brother, sitting in police custody on his 66th birthday, I mean, I don't think anybody could have predicted that. Although, you know, there have been forces building up in their assessments against him, whether it relates to his time as trade envoy and potential misconduct in public office, or whether it relates to how much he knew about Epstein's sex trafficking operation, which is still unclear. So I think this whole thing does beg the question of why, given there is sort of a limitless paper trail, which the latest tranche of Epstein files kind of revealed to us, why there has been such a lack of curiosity by the palace, by the police, by the government to explore this further, given that his association with Epstein was known for so many years. So I think it really does beg that question, although I would sort of be reticent to lay a lot of the blame on the late Queen's door, because we know that Andrew misled his entire family, not only the public, but his entire family. He was not transparent about anything in relation to his ties with Epstein. So she kind of operated based on the information she had at the time, the evidence she had at the time, also being in her 90s as well. And we know that Andrew was a blind spot for her. I'm not saying that that wasn't the case. It very much was. And the King potentially could have acted sooner as well, in stripping him of his titles. But at least now police are shown to be doing this by the book, without fear or favour, as we've said, and hopefully it goes forward in that way with the King's support, as he made clear today.
OK, thanks so much. Let's go to Sandringham, shall we, where Andrew was arrested this morning, and our correspondent, Shaman Freeman-Powell, is there for us now. Shaman, you've been there all day. What has been unfolding behind you?
Yeah, well, it's nightfall now, but there is still lots of activity here on the wood farm at Sandringham estate. You may be able to see there are a few officers that are milling around behind me. There are more officers further down the road, and there's been lots of members of the public that have been coming by to stop and take pictures, really, and to mark what has been an extraordinary day. What you may be able to see over my shoulder and what you can't see in front of me is that the world's media has now descended here on Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, of course, because this is where Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was arrested at around 8 a.m. this morning. It's where we saw those extraordinary pictures of those unmarked police cars entering the Wood Farm where we are now. And of course, it was only a few hours after that that Thames Valley Police confirmed that a man in his 60s had been arrested. Now, of course, arresting Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor gives police the opportunities to put forward official questions. It also gives police opportunities to search his addresses. This address here at Wood Farm is one of two addresses that Sky News understands is being searched. And in the best of times, these searches can take an awful long time. But if you think about the sheer size of these properties, it is likely to take police a considerable amounts of time to collate all of that evidence, or potential evidence, I should say. And they will be going through those properties with a fine-tooth comb. They'll be looking for anything, really, that's scraps of paper, any diaries or documents that are left around, anything that could have been hidden in books, for example, as well as looking for digital communications too. They'll be looking through emails, as well as any messages, any communications that will be able to support its investigation. Now, of course, here it means that the police are able to hold suspects, any suspects, for up to 24 hours without being charged. However, they can actually apply if it's authorised to hold a suspect for longer. So now the main question is how long Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor will remain in custody, and whether any charges will come forward as a result.
Shimon Freeman-Powell, thank you so much. Well, one of the big questions now is what happens next, especially from a legal point of view. Well, joining me now, I'm pleased to say, is partner at Grosvenor Law, Andrew Gilmore. Hello, thank you for joining us. This is quite an unusual charge, isn't it? Misconduct in public office. You should say he's been arrested, not charged, but misconduct in public office. Just explain to us how the law applies in this case.
Well, the law in this case, in respect of misconduct in a public office, boils down really to whether Andrew, at the time of the allegations, was a public officer, whether he willfully neglected to perform his duty and willfully misconducted himself to such a degree that public's trust in Andrew as an official, as an office holder, was broken down to such a degree that it breaches the criminal threshold, and that to do so without reasonable excuse or justification.
Andrew, I'm just going to come in because we have just had some breaking news coming to us here at Sky News that Prince Andrew, formerly Prince Andrew, now Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, has been released from custody from Aylsham Police Station. So that is a significant development. Released from custody. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been released from custody at Aylsham Police Station. So could you tell us a bit on the time frame now that he's been released?
Yes, well, what will happen now is that the police will continue investigating. You have to remember that they've seized a lot of documents potentially, and also electronic devices from Andrew. These will then be sifted through, looked at in detail, processed, and then the case file, as it were, for the investigation will be put together, and that will then be sent to the Crown Prosecution Service for reviewing lawyers to make a decision whether to charge or not.
And how long could that process take?
Well, it depends on the size of the documentation that the police have to review and the evidence in case, but I would anticipate at least a few months for that to happen.
And what can we infer about the length of time that he's been with the police today?
Well, I mean, obviously they've got a lot of questions, but this is still an early part of their investigation. Like I say, because they've not processed the evidence that they've seized today, and that will have to be looked at carefully. So the evidence itself will mean that this is an ongoing case, and that it will be constantly being reviewed as it goes along.
And in terms of how things played out this morning, I mean, it was unlikely that he would have known, was it, that police were coming?
It seems so, yes. I think the whole purpose of the arrest was to allow the police to use the seizure powers that attach to that arrest to take hold of these documents. So any forewarning for Andrew would have negated the need for that. So no, I don't think he would have known.
And could you just tell us a little bit more, in your experience, what Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's day might have looked like, how things might have unfolded, what his conditions would have been?
Well, he would have been taken to a dedicated holding centre where there are custody suites, interview rooms, and ultimately cells. When he's not in interview, he may well have been in consultation with his lawyers in a room. The places themselves are comfortable, but they're far from luxurious. It's possible that he may have been kept in a cell for a certain period of time, but for most of the time he would either be in an interview or with his lawyer, I suspect. And
you've touched on this in terms of the powers that police would have had to seize his devices, search his property. Could you just tell us a bit more about that, because it's extensive, isn't it? It is, yes. Well, under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984, which is the powers the police have to make the arrest, there are also, as I say, attaching to that arrest powers that allow searches of premises and person. So the police would have used those to conduct this search. And in terms of what the police would have had to consider in the decision to arrest him, because, they could have questioned him rather than arrest him, what would they have been considering? Well, I think, again, the securing evidence is the important part for the police at this stage. Potential evidence that Andrew may have on his devices or documents around his home and premises. And I think that was the ultimate purpose of the arrest. And can we just reiterate very quickly the breaking news we've had in the last few minutes, that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been released from custody from Elsham Police Station. And sorry to ask you the same question again, but I just want to remind people that we've had this breaking news that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been released from custody. Could you just tell us in a bit more detail what happens now and what the timeframe might be? Yeah, sure. The police will take away all the documents and devices they've seized today. They will be processed and looked at very carefully. A file will then be built and put together by the police that will assess all the evidence. That file will then be sent to the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS. Reviewing lawyers will look at that, and then from there, they will make a decision of whether to charge or not. And how long could that process take? That could take anything between 6 months, even a year, possibly. Depends on the size of the evidence that's been seized, but it would take a significant amount of months, I would say. OK, Andrew Gilmore, thank you so much for giving us that perspective. That was very helpful. Thank you. Right, let's bring our panel back in, shall we? India, Tom and Hannah. Hannah, your reaction to the news we've just had now, he's been released from custody.
Yeah, I mean, it's the legal process taking its course. I think there's a major question in my mind. There's a number of things that disturb me about all of this in terms of the proceedings. One of them is not to criticise anybody particularly, but the focus on it's his birthday. What might he be experiencing in prison? I find all of that colour that we don't need, because at the heart of this are women and girls who have been trafficked and abused and raped. And I find it distasteful, if I can be honest with you. I also find it very difficult that we're in the situation where only now the police are investigating. Only now are they going to gather evidence. He's known for a long time, the former prince, that there's a very good chance the police are going to be coming looking for him. Who knows what has been hidden or gotten rid of? Normally, if someone, and we talk about nobody being above the law, was involved with somebody like Epstein or associated with somebody who was now known to have committed such serious crimes, you would expect that the authorities might have acted more quickly. And I think there is a lot of questions to be answered around that. And we can only hope that the evidence that they need to find is there in the course of due process. But there are questions about why it has taken so long. And there are questions rightly coming from lots of people about trust in the establishment. And I think that is where there will be huge challenges for the monarchy in terms of its future and the trust that we have.
I have to say, you know, he has always denied any wrongdoing, and this arrest is about misconduct in public office, not those alleged sexual offences. But you make the really important points, particularly about trust in public office. Tom?
Yes, I mean, there's been a lot of commentary today, hasn't there, about the fact that this was not an interview under caution, that he was arrested, and we've obviously seen now in recent minutes the fact that he's been released from custody. No doubt they will want to continue to build that evidential picture to understand what's been said today. But I think it isn't insignificant that this reaches back into government from a considerable length of time ago. And the fact that Gordon Brown has provided additional information today and he's come forward to say that is something that I think is probably very much of note. But it does beg questions about the mechanics of government at that time, things that happened, and no doubt the police and others are going to want to wade through considerable volumes of information, probably with disclosure from Whitehall to try and aid that process. So there is an awful lot of water still to go under the bridge as part of that due process that will now follow, and we'll have to see where this ends up.
And India, we've seen the King and Queen Camilla, separate events in London today. What will be running through the King's mind?
I mean, as we know, he didn't know about the arrest prior to it happening this morning, so it would have been a seismic shock to them as well as to the public. And I just think he did the right thing by putting out that statement at midday, making clear that he gave the police and officials his wholehearted support, making clear that this should be a full, fair and proper investigation into his brother. We saw him get asked the question by reporters at the event he was at today at London Fashion Week, opening London Fashion Week, and he didn't respond. And he sort of, you know, was his usual self, greeting crowds and smiling and waving. And I do think that amid all this instability for the monarchy, he has to be seen as the sort of stalwart leader, the monarch who has addressed this, but who now has to get on with the job, you know, has to get on with serving the people of this country in the role that he's supposed to do. And I do think that they have been very sort of mindful of the fact that all the good work that they're doing on the ground has been very much put, you know, on the back burner in relation to all the headlines about Andrew, of course, the sensationalism about all these claims. It's detracting from the real work of the royal family. So that is something that will be running through their minds. And I suspect Kensington Palace as well. As we know, they wanted to get ahead of it too by releasing a statement last week before William's trip to Saudi. So I think we're seeing them trying to be more proactive about this issue. As Hannah mentioned, you know, we are talking about a number of victims and justice needs to be done by them. And that is sort of at the forefront of everything. And the royals did mention that in their statements last week as well.
Yeah, and the King, of course, has already stripped Andrew of his titles, ordered him to vacate Royal Lodge. It's important to remember that it is the institution of the monarchy, but it is also a family, and this is his brother.
That's the sort of dichotomy, isn't it? That it's a family member for him, and he has done all he can in terms of officially stripping him of everything, bar the Act of Parliament that would be needed to remove him from the line of succession. But the King has sort of made clear that he doesn't want to waste parliamentarians' time unless strictly necessary with that kind of due process. But I do think that in terms of what he could have removed from Andrew's life as punishment, he can't really go any further than he has. And I think they're trying to draw a line under the entire saga, which seems just a difficult thing to do. And I think if, you know, your legal expert was right and it's going to take 6 months to a year for the police to even start, you know, trawling through all these possibly millions of documents relating to Andrew's time as trade envoy, then a line is not going to be drawn under this. And I think damage mitigation for the overall reputation of the monarchy is going to be quite difficult to contain.
And we saw a very swift response from the King today.
We did, very swift, and correctly so. I think, again, he wants to be seen, to be proactive, to, you know, not just be silent about what's going on. I mean, it's seismic, it's extraordinary. As we mentioned, an arrest of a member of the royal family hasn't happened in that way since the mid-1600s. And this, I mean, you know, doesn't compare to even the abdication or even the sort of exiles from the royal family, let's call it, or the extramarital affairs of bygone eras. You know, this all pales in comparison to a senior member of the royal family potentially facing jail time.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we were talking earlier about Princess Anne and her dangerous dogs, but this is completely uncomparable to anything in modern history.
It's incomparable to Princess Anne's dog incident, and it's sort of, it must be taken so seriously with the gravity that it deserves. And I'm almost thinking that among all these files that they might search, perhaps they might also find things in relation to the potential sex trafficking claims and his involvement with Epstein, how much he knew. It all needs to really come to the surface now. There needs to be so much more transparency about this because, as we've all mentioned, otherwise, you know, faith in these public institutions is being eroded by the length of time that it took to get serious about this. You know, despite Geoffrey being very vocal about this for the last few years, and even her posthumous memoir detailing everything that she suffered at Epstein's hands. And I think even in the US, if you look across the Atlantic, you know, it's only Ghislaine who's faced punishment for this. And I think that there's been this web of protection around these powerful individuals with ties to Epstein that just needs to be dismantled now.
OK, thank you so much, India. We'll come back to you very shortly. Well, we have just had a statement through from police on the breaking news coming through to us here. It says Thames Valley Police is able to provide an update in relation to investigation into the offence of misconduct in public office. On Thursday, the 19th of February, we arrested a man in his 60s from Norfolk on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The arrested man has now been released under investigation. We can also confirm that our searches in Norfolk have now concluded. I should say we also understand the forces' searches in Berkshire are continuing. Right, let's bring our panel back in, shall we? Hannah, so we know that he is out of custody now. Where does this go from here?
Well, I mean, I'm surprised that the searches have happened so quickly, but they're obviously been very efficient, and I suppose they have to complete all of the searches, and there are many properties. And I think it is worth remembering that, you know, whilst, you know, the King put that statement out, and I thought the statement was very interesting because the King described Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor as if he was some person out there in the ether, when actually it's his brother. It was very carefully worded. I think that's of note. I also think that you have to remember that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor resides at the King's pleasure on the Sandringham estate. You know, now there are lots of questions to be asked about where he has to be, and I've seen a lot of commentary today about how difficult that is. And as a woman, I find that really uncomfortable because I think I don't really care where he is, actually. What I care about is that there is full transparency, as India says. We have to absolutely get to the bottom of this. And I think there are big questions about the monarchy. And yes, the King has stripped Andrew of all of the titles that he can, but he is still remarkably 8th in line to the throne. If something was to happen to those other 7 members, I can't imagine something like that would, he would potentially be next in line to the throne. Now, people will say we shouldn't waste parliamentary time. What can be more important than making sure that we have a robust system? Now, I am not a monarchist. I will put my hands up. I'm a former SNP MP. You know, I believe passionately in Scottish independence, and I believe that the people of Scotland will make their decision about a monarch, you know, and about having a monarchy. And I look forward to the monarchy making their case to the people of Scotland when it comes around. I suspect that their jacket might be on a bit of a sugary peg, but the fundamental question is, this is what we've got as an establishment, And this is what many Commonwealth nations have got as well. And there are lots of discussions that have been going on for a very long time about whether the monarchy is fit for purpose for a modern age. But we are in the situation where we have known for quite some time that Andrew has links to Epstein, that there have been issues. And it has taken until now for this to come forward, for there to be, police investigation. And I think there are many people out there, whichever side of the argument you're on in terms of the monarchy, if you're a monarchist and you believe in a monarchy, then you want this to be investigated because you don't want the monarchy to be damaged. You don't want the king and others to be brought into disrepute. If you're somebody like me who has questions about it, who frankly would like to see the monarchy dismantled or certainly slimmed down and the people to have a decision about whether they want a monarchy or not, then this is exactly why. Because this is the firm, the establishment protecting itself, and as India said, putting a ring of protection. The web that Epstein had weaved of, donations, philanthropy, bringing in the most powerful people in the world, supplying them, it would appear, with, trafficked women, meant that he was able to stop himself from any kind of scrutiny. And that included Lord Mandelson, that included the UK's ambassador to the US, who, let's not forget, there are some in the media that have aided and abetted this, because just after Mandelson was being, the investigation was announced into him, he was on the front page of a national newspaper and their magazine, sitting in his slippers with his dog beside him in some cosy photo shoot, saying, I've done some terrible things, or I've done some bad things, I've had some bad luck. I mean, utterly remarkable that that is the situation, and that the Prime Minister saw fit, when he knew that, I appreciate the Prime Minister didn't have all of the information that we have now, but he did know that Mandelson had links to Epstein. He did know that there were concerns raised within the Cabinet Office about his appointment, and he ignored those calls.
Is today a day where we start to see proper scrutiny, Tom? Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, it seems today has been treated just like another citizen.
Well, I don't think anything other than absolute transparency is going to hold in this situation. The public calls for this are growing. I thought it was good that the royal family were out there today fulfilling those public visits, which will have been incredibly important to the people that they came into contact with and they interacted today. But you did see some of that very real anger that there is out there in the country about what has happened. And I just think that without that transparency, without the full truth being known and properly understood, and there being consequences for those who've been involved in wrongdoing in relation to Jeffrey Epstein, people who enabled that appalling criminality to happen, that trafficking of young women and girls, that benefiting seemingly from insider information from within government, that is not something that is just going to go away. It goes right to the heart of public trust in our institutions. And I hate this situation. I hate this because, I am a monarchist, unlike Hannah. I am somebody that believes in the monarchy, and I see the monarchy as being something that, in many respects, is a force for good in our society, that sees a lot of good things happen in our communities. That support, that advocacy, I think, for example, the Prince and Princess of Wales are really good news for our country. So I hate seeing all of that damaged, and I also just can't stand seeing the King put in this terrible position in all of this. But that proper understanding of what has happened has to be reached, because this isn't going to go away.
Thank you both. We'll come back to you. And India, also, Andrew's arrest comes after he was mentioned repeatedly in the Epstein files. Millions of emails, documents, photos and videos were released last month, prompting serious questions about the former Duke of York's relationship with the paedophile financier. Our data and forensic correspondent, Tom Cheshire, has been looking at the files.
It was the latest release of the Epstein files, 3.5 million of them, that piled the pressure onto Andrew. Now he has been arrested. And they contain embarrassing documents, photos like this of him on all fours at an undisclosed location. But the police investigation doesn't appear to be about his interactions with Virginia Giuffre or any potential allegations of sexual abuse. Allegations Andrew has always strongly denied. Instead, it's his time as a trade envoy, an official position that is under scrutiny. The timeline here is really important, so let's start with that. It was back in September 2001 that Andrew was appointed trade envoy. In June 2008, his friend Jeffrey Epstein was convicted in Florida for procuring child prostitution. Just over a year later, Epstein was released from prison. In December 2010, Andrew visited Jeffrey Epstein in New York. In 2019, he said that this is when he broke off contact with him. In February 2011, Andrew continues to email Epstein, and we'll come back to this. In July 2011, Andrew was forced to quit his trade envoy role. April 2015, and allegations against Andrew emerge in court documents regarding Virginia Giuffre. And in February this year, police started assessing claims over his links with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the latest files appear to show correspondence between Epstein and Andrew when the latter was trade envoy on non-personal business. So let's start with this email. It's from November 2010, and what it is an aide forwarding to the Duke of York attached reports for Vietnam, Singapore, Hong Kong and Shenzhen in relation to your recent visit to Southeast Asia. That was as trade envoy. 5 minutes later, the Duke, as he was known back then, forwards that on to Jeffrey Epstein. There's another one too. This is about Afghanistan. It's also 2010. It's sent in December, and it's from Andrew directly to Jeffrey Epstein himself. And he says, attached is a confidential brief produced by the Provincial Reconstruction Team in Helmand Province. That's in Afghanistan. He sends that directly to Epstein and says, I'm going to offer this elsewhere in my network, including Abu Dhabi, but would be very interested in your comments. Then there's this email from Andrew again to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the important thing here is the date, February the 9th, 2011. That is after when Andrew had originally said he ended his relationship with Epstein, but it's also when he's still a trade envoy, that official position. The contents of these emails are just fragments of events, and we don't know the specifics of the allegations being investigated. Again, this all appears to have taken place while Andrew was trade envoy, an official position. He has denied all wrongdoing, and it is now the subject of a police investigation.
Right, let's bring our panel back in, shall we? Tom, Hannah and India. India, what do you think the King's priority is going to be now?
Goodness, I think the King's priority is going to be continuing the work of the royal family, continuing the boots-on-the-ground work, continuing to serve the country and provide some modicum of stability while it undergoes, obviously, such an unstable and pretty damning time with his younger brother.
Sorry to interrupt, but we've actually just got some pictures we're going to show you now. We've got some pictures. Here he is, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, leaving police custody in Aylsham Police Station, where he was being held today. That is Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. These pictures just coming through to us in the last few moments. So we're talking there, India, about the King's priorities now. We've seen him out and about today. We're now seeing his brother leaving custody.
I think in relation to his brother, there's a few things. Number one, Buckingham Palace have always sort of guided that there is a duty of care amid all the pressure, the endless litany of headlines and allegations and now investigations. And I think probably they will be thinking of him, of course, as a person as well, as a member of their family, even though their statement today, as Hannah mentioned, does really try and separate him from the monarchy as a whole. I think that's really been the most important thing for them, is to just reiterate how, once removed they are from his conduct. So I think the King, he's also just moved on to the King's private estate in Sandringham, so he's no longer a sort of burden to the taxpayer. And we understand at the Telegraph also that his legal fees will not be taxpayer funded as well. So they've made that clear too, of course. So I do think that his priority will be keeping this sort of stability and continuity, as the late Queen was famous for, amid a very tumultuous time.
And we've seen him out and about today, the Queen, Camilla, also out and about, but they have faced questions from a distance about this. And just to remind people, the breaking news that we've had, Andrew has been released under investigation following his arrest, and we have had images of him leaving police custody. Let's bring back in Hannah and Tom. Hannah, watching those pictures, what do you think?
I mean, I'm sort of lost for words in the sense of, it's a man who's potentially done very serious things and betrayed his country as well. We have to remember that he's being investigated for misconduct in public office. Alleged. Yeah, he's being investigated for alleged misconduct in public office, which, by the way, carries a very serious sentence. The maximum sentence is life in prison. So that should be remembered. And I think what we will all be reflecting on is, OK, how broad is the scope of the police investigation and what might else they find? Because we all know about his links to Epstein, obviously Virginia Giuffre's book. We've spoken about the allegations that she made. And also, the payoff that was, there was an out-of-court settlement at the end of 2020, beginning of 2022, when he came to an agreement out of court with Virginia Giuffre, and she was paid £12 million. And I think there are questions to be answered about that. They're the questions that are in my mind tonight as well, is, OK, how did he use his role as trade envoy? Yes. And there seems to be some discussion about, is that an official role? And it would be an unspeakable and completely unacceptable irony if he had abused his position and there was evidence of that, but there was no proceedings brought because a trade envoy is not a proper role. So I think there are questions in my mind about that and about that being clarified. And that, again, speaks to me, the corrupt nature of elements of the establishment in the UK, that somebody can be like a member of the royal family can be put in a role. It's not really official. They won't really be held to account. We don't know that. I'm just saying for the sake of argument and playing devil's advocate. And then they do abuse that role. And what happens then? And, we've never been in this situation before. It is unprecedented. But I think, my thoughts tonight, above all else, are with the family of people like Virginia Giuffre. They are with the women and girls that have been trafficked, the women that have stood up in America and spoken out and have been let down time and time again there. I think our thoughts should be with them.
OK, thank you both. We'll come back to you. Well, as you could imagine, there's been reaction to this around the world, in particular in America.
We begin this hour with major breaking news out of the United Kingdom. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the former British prince, was arrested this morning on his 66th birthday.
Well, the family of Virginia Giuffre also spoken in the United States. Virginia was a victim of sex trafficking by Jeffrey Epstein and was Andrew's highest profile accuser. Today's events are not directly related to that case, I should say, but the family said their hearts were lifted by the news of his arrest.
It feels like this surreal moment, a piece of justice that Virginia has been fighting for this entire time. And I think we're just so proud. We're so proud. We're so freaking proud of our sister right now. We really wish she was here physically to see it, because it is her pressure and her truth that has brought us to this place, that has, paved the way for all of these survivors to come forward. And so, there's mixed emotions. We just miss her so much and wish that we could call her to just scream on the phone with her,
The first step here has been taken by the UK, which is amazing. I think there's so much more that needs to be done here. I'm hoping they conduct a full investigation and there's a conviction of some sort. I think, the thing that keeps resonating in my head is when my sister, she famously said, and I'm just going to paraphrase this now, but they know what happened. We know what happened, and only one of us is telling the truth, and we know that's us. I hope that this is just the beginning, because I think there's a lot to be said. I think if you follow the money, you follow their position, you're going to start uncovering some really hard, dark truths very quickly.
Let's cross to Washington, shall we? And our US correspondent, James Matthews. James, is there a sense today that the UK are leading the way on this?
It does, rather, Ali, and not for the first time, I might say. Donald Trump, incidentally, the president, has made his first comment on Andrew's arrest. He was asked, do you think others in this country will see similar charges? And his answer was, I'm the expert in a way because I've been totally exonerated, so I can speak on it. It's a very sad thing, he said. His brother, who is coming to our country very soon, the King, it's a very sad thing. So Donald Trump's first reaction to that arrest. But, Ali, listen to the reaction of players in Congress. Speaking to them this morning, they clearly believe that events in the UK reinforce their case to have Andrew called before them. They'll make it work, whatever and wherever it takes them. That's what they're saying, talking about being happy to travel to the UK if that's what it will take for testimony to be drawn from Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. As a foreign national, of course, he can't be subpoenaed to give evidence before that House Oversight Committee, which is investigating the Epstein affair. He has ignored all requests to testify, but committee members, they believe he has questions to answer over and above the interests of Thames Valley Police, because that arrest centres on alleged misuse of public office. Epstein, of course, is a bigger story of sexual abuse, child sex trafficking. There are questions that Washington wants to ask Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor on that. I spoke to the Democratic member of that House Oversight Committee, Suhas Subramaniam, and essentially he's saying to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, listen, we want to hear from you any time, any place, anywhere.
I think this is a breakthrough. The reality is no one's been arrested in a position of power like he has and been held accountable the way he's being held accountable. And I think it shows that this investigation is fruitful and yielding some results. And the victims certainly are appreciative of the fact that law enforcement is willing to hold people accountable based on what's found in the files. That this isn't just an exercise in voyeurism and seeing who was involved and engaged with Jeffrey Epstein, that there's going to be real consequences. There's also real consequences for people who don't cooperate in our investigation. And so I applaud the arrest. I hope something will come of it. Most importantly, I hope that we get some answers, because we haven't gotten any from him.
What do you think are the implications for your request for Andrew to come and give answers or take questions from the House Oversight Committee?
Well, he says he did nothing wrong and he committed no criminal activity or wrongdoing, which is fine. But if he wants to clear his name and his family's name, then he'll still come and cooperate with us.
He's quite happy with what he sees as steps towards justice in the United Kingdom, not so happy at stagnation, as he and others would have it, in the United States. There is concern here on this side of the Atlantic that there is an accountability gap, and that the guilty in this country are being given a free pass.
James Matthews, thank you so much for us there in the US. And there we have it. Thank you to our panel also, India, Tom and Hannah. And an extraordinary day. A member of the royal family has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Coming up next will be Mark Austin with a special edition of the UK Tonight. Thank you so much for watching. A member of the royal family arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office.